Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Nicole, or AKA Making Stuff Better. We have a special guest today. Sweeney is a social media person, and in particular, he's really good at LinkedIn. Well, he's good at lots of things, but LinkedIn being one of them. And he's going to talk to us today a little bit about what he sees in his work with how he works with his clients with LinkedIn and ways that people can improve their LinkedIn. So, thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Cole. Thank you for having me. Happy to be
Yeah.
here.
So is also one of our virtual anchor space members. So if those of you if you enjoy hanging out with me and Con on the video broadcast, imagine how fun we would be on a weekday video call or over Slack, and you can join us there.
Every morning.
Every morning. Well, just about on the weekdays anyway, for sure. Yeah. So Con, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of how you work with people, your company, and what you do before we get started, so people can know more.
Sure. I run a small social media consultancy down here in the New York City area, working with small, mid-sized companies, professional people, writers. Principally, what I do is I develop a social media campaign for them. I'll develop the content. I'll do the training. One of the niches that I work in is LinkedIn, which is a requirement for really anybody who's out there with either a business or a career these days. And how I work with people, particularly for LinkedIn, is to sit down, understand what their goals and objectives are, where they want to go, and then working with them, develop a LinkedIn profile using best practices and developing a profile which is specific to their needs. I don't work with a cookie cutter approach. I try to personalize it, that when a person is finished, they sit and they say, wow, that is me, but I never really thought that was me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really important. Like, obviously, Con and I are both social media people, and, it's really nice to have colleagues that you can talk about things with and approach things with. I've learned a lot from Con, and I appreciate kind of having him in my life generally. And if you want to know more about Con and what he does, and we'll put this on the screen again, this is your website, and you blog there, and you have lots of useful resources, and obviously links to your social from there as well. So you guys can check that out. Sommeti.com. And so shall we start with the first question?
Fire away.
Things I've always wanted to ask you, Con. So you talk a little bit about LinkedIn. I think one of your most read blog posts ever that you had was about LinkedIn being your obituary, right? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
And so
your LinkedIn profile, your obituary.
Oh yeah. That's and I think a lot of us can sort of relate to that, because we're like, oh yeah, when was the last time I touched my LinkedIn? And oh yeah, I guess you could sort of get a brief summary of what I've been up to by looking at that. But what's something that you see everybody doing wrong on LinkedIn? And
I think the first thing that people do wrong, and it's one of the biggest ones, is they don't complete their LinkedIn profile. There are several major components to a profile for it to look complete. And if you do it correctly, when you look at your profile in private mode, LinkedIn will tell you that you have all-star status. That is, you have all the pieces on the profile. That doesn't mean the profile is perfect, but at least you got the basics. One of the most important ones is your profile picture. People go looking to a profile to see who you are. And there you see my mug staring at you on the page. If you don't have that picture there, people are wondering, what are you hiding? There is a certain amount of profile fraud on LinkedIn. People like to see a human picture. The next thing that people don't do is they don't complete the major sections. For example, the header. Cole's moving the cursor over there right now. What's your title? Have something there that is relevant to what you do, and don't make it too general, and try not to be overly specific. Scrolling down the page, the next item up would be your About section. You have 2,000 characters here where you can tell your story. And this is something that people really don't get with LinkedIn. Many people just simply copy and paste their resume over. That's really not enough. LinkedIn is your opportunity to tell your story. Who are you? What do you do? What value do you bring to the table? And for those of us in business, for ourselves, it's an opportunity to put in a call to action, to invite people in to talk about us. So really, it's the completeness of the profile that is important for me, is making sure that you've got all the components there. They're not redundant. This is something else that another mistake that people make. They'll repeat the same information multiple times on the profile. And what you're doing is you're wasting space. People who work with LinkedIn know where to go to get the information. They know where to find your education. They know where to find your previous experiences, your previous employers. You don't have to keep repeating it through the profile. Make sure that each part of the profile fulfills its purpose. It's unique. Make sure your grammar is correct. No misspellings. Don't misspell your name. Yes, I've seen that.
Wow. Yeah.
Don't misspell previous employers, especially if it's a major corporation like IBM. These are little things that, if you do right, enhances the credit. Trust me, Nicole, I've seen it all.
A misspelling of IBM. It's like 3 letters, and it says what it is. Okay. I don't know. Just checking.
Also, just wait if I may on one other point too. And when you have that profile picture, make sure it's reasonably professional. Make sure that a friend of mine who's also in the business, she says, look, ladies, when you put in your profile picture, don't crop out your wedding picture with your husband's hand on your shoulder. One of the funniest ones I saw, I was doing a research project once on LinkedIn, and I came across a profile of a gentleman with his young son, and they were both in clown costumes. And the fellow was a certified public accountant. So it really distracts from...
Right. It's one way to stand out in search, I suppose, but I could see it backfiring, I guess, more than it could.
Look, if you're in the circus business, if you're a comic, if you're in the entertainment business, sure, knock yourselves out. But when you're in certain commercial activities, try to go to at least business casual.
Yeah. And at least, I mean, somewhat look like your picture too. I've seen some people who are using clearly very, very old pictures, like you can tell because it has like the old, the filter from, you can tell when a picture was taken in the 90s. Just, you can just tell.
Look, I see pictures out there. I know the people personally. I know they're in their 50s and 60s. And I know those pictures are from when they were in their 20s. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I know whenever people meet with me, and maybe this happens to you too, when they first meet with me, they're like, oh, you, and I remember at first they'd say, oh, you look like your picture or whatever, like I was what they expected. And that kind of made them feel at ease with dealing with me, maybe with something that was a little bit more technical or something they didn't necessarily know that what they were. Yeah. There's just that level of trust, especially with internet stuff. That's it's really important.
You mentioned a very key word there, trust.
Yeah.
And, if when people ultimately do meet you, because the whole purpose of LinkedIn is to take the conversation offline at some point. And if you do not live up to what their expectations are from their profile, you're going to have a problem. A friend of mine is an executive recruiter. He uses LinkedIn all the time. He's also a client. And his view is, Con, if you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist. And the reason you don't exist for me is, if I get a resume and you're not on LinkedIn, I have to go out and verify every single piece of information on that resume. If you're on LinkedIn, LinkedIn does a lot of that verification for me. Secondly, the other problem I have is if you're not on LinkedIn, why aren't you there? What's the problem? Something you're trying to hide in your past? Or are you unfamiliar or uncomfortable with technology, which in today's world is a big mistake?
Yeah, I guess both of those things would signal kind of a potential larger problem. And the other thing too that I think, and I'm not sure if you have seen this too, Con, like spending some time on those things. So when someone does a search on LinkedIn, what comes up, it shows you a little snippet of information, obviously, before people click in and see your whole profile, right? It shows the picture, it shows your name, and then it shows like that headline. So like spending time, like kind of making sure that those things make people want to click to learn more and have are kind of good things to kind of spend some energy on.
Well, for example, one mistake a lot of people make, particularly up here in the New York City area, where the financial markets are a large part of the economy, financial service firms make everybody vice presidents. You look at LinkedIn profiles and they say, header, vice president. Okay, that really doesn't tell a lot. And when I work with people on their profiles, I'll ask them, like, when you go out and you're looking to hire somebody, what do you put into the search field? Do you put vice president, or do you put a functional description of what you're looking for? Mm-hmm. And invariably, they all stop and they go, yeah, you're right. I never go looking for a vice president or a director or a manager.
Right.
I go out there looking for an accounts payable specialist, payroll specialist, credit card operations. You
Mhm.
don't look for a very generic title.
Yeah.
Think about if you were looking for yourself, what would you put in that header?
Yeah, and obviously if you just say like I own this company, I mean that's fine, but like people can see that already because that's another field of information. So you can use that headline area. Yeah, if you want to mention the name of your company, fine, but you can use that headline area to kind of highlight other things.
Well, yeah, and don't get overblown. Like I have many friends who are self-employed like myself, and what they have is for their company, CEO and founder.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, that's great. But for folks like us, Nicole,
Yeah.
a little overblown. That's why I put managing director down for so many.
Yeah.
Also, it helps when people are looking at the company. They don't know exactly how big your company is.
Yeah.
So as managing director, I could have people above me, I could have people below me. And as my company grows, it helps the image.
I had a friend who was an IT consultant and he had like 6 different email addresses. So he had like marketing at the company, info at the company, director, and they all went to him.
Yeah,
So
that
speaking of kind
becomes
of keeping things up to date, actually, this is a good segue into the next question, which is, and this is something that I've run into and I don't really know how to think about it, which is like how often and what parts of my LinkedIn profile should I keep up to date? Because I want to like have it, obviously, I'm not going to look at it every single day or something like that, but I do want to update it on some kind of regular schedule.
well. There's two parts to the answer here.
Yeah, 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 totally. I
The,
can see that.
the first one is whenever there's been a major change in your career or you've delivered a new project, you want to make sure that you're updating your profile as you go along. Uh, I try to stay away from rules like every 6 months, every 12 months, but most of us are what we do for a living. Things are happening continually. And especially if we're self employed, factor those into your profile as you go. Uh, because what will happen is if you got your update notices set properly, people will be informed as to what is going on in your career and it'll come across in their feeds. Now, if you happen to, you change your tie from red to blue, I wouldn't recommend putting that into your profile. Make sure they're material, um, but make sure people see that you're current. The same thing with the profile picture. As you get older or things change, you may want to change it. Okay, like right now I've got COVID hair and I haven't updated my profile there, and I'm hoping I can get a
Well, I
haircut.
mean, we're all going to get haircuts eventually, right?
Right. We
Theoretically.
hope so. But for people who, uh, my favorite examples have to do with facial hair, like men. They will have a picture, no beard. They decide to grow a full beard, and there's a contrast. Yeah. My advice is put in a new picture. Women will do a major change in their hairstyle. And I'm just talking about, doing a trim of a couple of inches off. But, they go from shoulder length to,
To
a
blue
very
string hair.
short hairstyle. My recommendation would be at that point be a good time to update your profile picture. Now, these have to do with what I would call the static components of the profile, your
Mhm.
picture, your about section, your experience, your projects, certifications, things like that. The other part of making sure that your profile is not an obituary, forgive me,
Brain
they're
slip.
like self, is engagement and content. Now, I know a lot of people who are on LinkedIn, they're really dead. And the only reason I know they're dead is they're friends of mine. I went to their funeral.
Oh,
Uh,
like literally dead. Okay, I'm
yeah,
following you now. Okay.
yeah. I mean, like dead, dead.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm a lot older than you, so I've met a lot more dead people in my life than you probably have.
I think you'd be surprised, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Okay. Um, so even if their profile was current at the moment they kicked off, people are going to bump into that and they'll think that, Joe or Mary are still there. But for your engagement, expanding your connections, liking, sharing, commenting on other people's content, asking questions, posting your own content on a regular basis. People see that, they know that you're out there, you're still in the game, you're alive. They don't see that, they don't know what to expect. Now, this is also important for you if you're looking for a new position or if you're looking for clients. They come in, they see what your thoughts are, see what you're writing, what you're thinking. It just helps that impression. We talked about trust before. Well, it's one thing to see a picture, it's one thing to see a description. But when a person is actively engaged on LinkedIn, you get a sense of who they are, what they are. If you're reading their comments and you're thinking, they're just a little too snarky for my business, maybe I won't make that phone call. Or, this person's on top of these uh, product issues right now. I'd like to have a conversation with them because, we're having those issues too, and nobody around here, frankly, has got any idea what's going on. This person seems to have a good idea of what's going on. So that's what you want to do, is you want to let people know that you're there, and if they come back regularly, they're going to get content from you. It's not just a matter of one and done. I set up my profile, and then I post an article, and then that's it for a year. If you can do it ideally on a weekly basis, some things even on a daily basis, just the commenting, the sharing, the liking, people get a sense of who you are. They know you're out there, and you can begin to build that relationship, which, as I said before, you can then proceed to take offline.
Right. And I will say too, it's kind of like before, I can always tell when maybe a friend or a colleague or like I can tell on social media when someone's about to maybe break up with somebody because they start like kind of doing a glow up, and I can tell on LinkedIn when someone is about to start looking for a new job because you start seeing all these changes or whatever. So I will say, even just like going on and periodically updating your LinkedIn, if you're the kind of person that might be looking for a new job a year or so from now, it becomes pretty obvious if you hadn't touched your profile in 4 years and suddenly you're like doing all this stuff that maybe something is coming down the pike, and your employer might sort of get a sense of that before maybe you're ready to.
I always know when my friends are in trouble with their jobs. First thing is I get a connection request.
Yep.
The next thing I know is I get a phone call saying, "Hey, Con, can you help me with my profile?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, "Let me guess. There's something wrong with the job." I'm like, "How'd you know?" "Well, you haven't talked to me all year."
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're getting the calls, but like also just as a normal person on LinkedIn, I can just tell.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just do that, if you just kind of do that a little bit all the time, and I think something you said earlier kind of resonated with me, which is like, okay, when I have a new project, part of, like onboarding a new client, I always think about like, okay, did I send them the agreement? Did I like invoice them? Did we like set up, whatever? But maybe part of what I should do too is like, all right, what are some of the things I should do on my end to like, maybe I should update the website, maybe I should update my, my website portfolio. Maybe I should update my LinkedIn profile and stuff like that. Maybe that should be part of when I get a new customer or start a new project.
Well,
on
when you
my side, not just the accounting and not just the work for the client, but like my part of things too.
Exactly. And the other thing you can do is request a recommendation on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
When I say that to some people, they're horrified. Like, what do you mean asking for a recommendation? I go, you can do it on LinkedIn. Write it, send it to them and say, look, would you give me a recommendation, please? I'd be happy to. I wrote it for you. Please feel free to revise it and post it. Just wrapping up the whole project and let people know, one, you did the work, and not only that, but the client is ecstatic over it.
Yeah, and I think people, when they think of recommendations, they think of the old school recommendations of like writing the letter, which was a lot of work. In a lot of cases, this is a paragraph. I mean, this is relatively short. This is not the to whom it may request full.
It's only about 350 characters, give or take.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, and I finally started offering too, like, hey, I am happy to draft something, and basically like, who's going to say no to that? Like, I mean, yeah, I might make edits or something like that, but if it's somebody I'd write a recommendation for and they're offering to do most of the work for me, like, why would I say no to that? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think most people are smart enough to understand these days that what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
You want to be a good citizen on social media, LinkedIn in particular, because you never know when you're going to be out there on the street yourself, and you're going to need some help.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. And actually that's a good, and kind of I was thinking the sort of last question or topic I have for you, because you've been working with lots of people. In particular, I know you specialize in, you work with everybody, but authors too. What are some things that you've seen success-wise with your clients that you've worked with on LinkedIn? I'm just trying to think if someone's watching this and they're thinking, oh, maybe I should do something with LinkedIn. I think hearing kind of some ways that other people have been successful might be a little bit motivating.
A few war stories. One of my earliest clients.
Those are more fun.
Yeah, one of my earliest clients, I was helping him with his profile. He was a freelance treasury advisor. He had very good experience working in corporate America. and he reached a point in his career where he had left a full-time position, and he was hiring out as a corporate treasurer for hire. And he had a pretty primitive profile, and we started working on it. One day he called me up, all excited. And we hadn't really finished it. We had the basics out blocked out. And he says, Con, you're not going to believe what happened. What? I just got a call from somebody. He saw my LinkedIn profile as it is and wants me to come in for an engagement. Wonderful.
Great.
So he went off and he did the contract engagement. We finished the profile. And then I meet him for one of our final meetings, and he says, guess what now? And I go, what? They offered me a job as their CFO. So now he's CFO of a high-tech startup in Brooklyn, and he's very happy. But it just shows you that by working on your profile, people out there will see it. And the employer, told my client that the only reason I came across you, they had no previous connection. I knew I needed somebody. I was looking for LinkedIn. Your profile came up, and you had what I wanted, and so he got hired. Another example, another client is helping her with her profile, get a position. She got a position. Then all of a sudden, she calls me up and said they withdrew the offer. The economy was a little rough, and so we said, all right, we went back, we reworked her profile. She had a couple of directions she could go in her career. And one of the problems with LinkedIn is you only have one profile, unlike a resume where you can have multiple variations on it. So we recast the profile in a different direction. And she came back a couple of months later, and she had a job, and she was happy. You've got to adapt your profile to your circumstances. If you've been a financial person your entire career, but you're trying to move into, let's say, IT or another discipline, you got to make sure the profile reflects where you want to go or has a story to go there. I'm working with another client right now, a young woman. She has a specific career goal in mind, and she's making a bit of a leap in her career, but it's a leap I feel that she can make. However, her original profile, her original resume were looking backwards. And we sat down and we went through all her experiences, and I realized that this leap is not such a big leap for her. She can do it. She's done the work, but her profile didn't reflect that. She wanted to move into a management position. Well, you've got all this management experience when you're not a manager. Let's include it. Let's talk about what you're doing in terms of problem solving. Let's talk about what you're doing in terms of presenting to senior management. We built that into her profile, and initially, when we started working, she says, yeah, this sounds like it's going to take a long time. I go, yeah, it takes us a little while. But when it was done, she was so excited. She said, I'm looking at myself here, and I never really thought of myself in this way. I knew what I wanted to do, but I never put it down pen to paper and did it. I go, that's what you got to do here on LinkedIn. The other thing we did is we got her to put a profile picture in, which, that was the last piece on the profile, and she got her all-star status. Now we're talking about engagement and content. Another client, a venture capitalist, he had set up his profile to be essentially retired former executive, but it didn't speak to what he really was now, which is a venture capitalist. This guy made enough money while he was working in corporate America that he now works in startups. So we redirected his profile so that when people look at it, they realize who he is, what he's doing. It tells a much better story for him, and he's already getting positive kudos from people who are meeting him and saying, like, I read your profile, and yeah, I understand what you can do for me. Let's talk. So those are examples of keeping it current and also being nimble enough to change it if you have to. It's not cast in concrete. The second story I told of the woman who got a job, and all of a sudden, the job went away. We had to fall back, reverse it, and we went in a slightly different direction. Several weeks later, she had a new job.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important to hold on. I'm getting some feedback, so I'm going to just mute you on your end here. I'll unmute you in a second. I don't know why I'm getting feedback all of a sudden, but I was, thinking that, the reason I have a liberal arts education, you know what I mean? And my degree's in geology, and but what I tell people is the software I work in didn't even exist when I was in college, so there was no way for me to really train for it. But what I can do with my liberal arts education, or like what people can do with skills that they built in other jobs, is use them in different, in different verticals or in slightly different situations, and have them still be really relevant.
What what you do what you do is you're showing, like I did with this current client I'm working, how your experiences built you towards where you are. You know, this woman wanted to put down her college GPA. Like, no, that counts for maybe 6 months outside you get out of college. What we want to talk about is what you did in each job since you've been out of school. We'll make sure we have the relevant experiences. We'll make sure we have the right keywords that people will be searching on LinkedIn. And I'm expecting that this woman early next year will have a much better job and she'll be happy. We're also transitioning her from a corporate world to the consulting world. Something she hadn't really thought about, but when she sat down and thought about what she really wanted to do, that was where she had to go, and she wants to go there. And now we're targeting a totally different group of employers for her. So LinkedIn is a great tool for planning your career and looking ahead to where you want to go. And remember, everybody you want to work with is out there, and if they're not out there, you don't want to know them.
Well, and a lot of, I think, decision makers in particular are on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? I don't know, I forget what the stat is, but like 70% of people who are on LinkedIn or something have some kind of decision-making power within their job, whether it's that they have their opinion count toward the decision or they actually make the decision. So, and I know with me, for a while, I was really good at this, and I've kind of fallen off the wagon, but this is inspiring me to get back on it, is I would try to post something once a week to my LinkedIn profile, which is so minimal, but what I realized is that, do you get I think I unsubscribed from the LinkedIn Digest because I unsubscribed from a bunch of emails a while back, but just about everyone gets the LinkedIn Digest, which I think it used to come out on Wednesdays. I don't know if it still does. And it was like, oh, here's what's going on in your network. Now, if nobody's posting anything, but you are, guess who shows up in everyone's LinkedIn Digest?
Exactly.
And I got the biggest contract I've ever gotten so far, knock on wood, maybe I'll get a bigger one, from a professor at a college who I didn't have him as a professor, but I was connected with him on LinkedIn because he was a professor at the college I went to in a different department than I was in. And he was like, oh, hey, Nicole, like, I see that you do this. I have an organization I know who's looking for help with that. And he made the introduction and we got the work. And it was like, yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, but it wasn't even somebody that it wasn't an old boss. It wasn't anybody I was even directly connected with. It was like a secondary connection, maybe even tertiary, we could call it, that got me the biggest job I've ever gotten, just because he happened to see stuff go by and knew me from seeing me around, it was a small campus. So he knew me from around campus. He knew I was a good worker. He didn't necessarily know my skill set in this particular arena because he knew me obviously in college before I got into this. So, but yeah, you just never know what these other people who are just out there in the world, they're kind of your eyes, and they can they can make an introduction. They can point you to a resource. And it's kind of like running into a bunch of these really like useful, helpful people all the time by being on LinkedIn.
And remember, they look good for referring you.
That's true.
And if you had, trust me, if you had had a poor profile, you probably never would have done, no matter how good the content was.
Yeah, and you want to give people I had a friend who he had taken 2 years out of the workforce. He was a stay-at-home dad, and he was working on their house that they were living in. And then he was trying to re-enter the workforce, and he was just super discouraged with kind of how to get back in and how he was going to like explain this absence. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes as women, we're sort of afforded that, of course you took a year off but like maybe men don't get the same respect for doing that. And he started working LinkedIn, and, he wasn't sure about it. But within 2 weeks he got headhunted and got a job offer. It wasn't his dream job, but it got him in to getting some money. He got the confidence back of like, okay, I can get a job. It wasn't me necessarily. I just wasn't like putting myself out there in the right way. And then he was able to like move to another job that worked better for him. But, maybe that first move isn't completely, maybe it's not always linear. You know what I mean?
You're right. Sometimes you got to make lateral moves to get back on the track. And again, you brought up a good one there because I've seen this a few times with friends and family. Men who are stay-at-home dads, and I respect that. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. That they're willing to help the family and do what they have to, but don't put down stay-at-home dad as your header.
No. And that's not what he did, but he sort of like, we were
I know
able
people who
to,
have.
yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, there's a way to sort of say it without saying it. But what happens is if someone's looking, I have a colleague right now who took some time off to be a caregiver for a sick relative. And he's, he's thinking like, okay, well, how am I going to explain to people that this is what I've been doing? And, there's a way to say it without saying it. I think as a potential
Yeah.
employer, if I put in, put that potential employer perspective on, I think, okay, if someone has a giant gap, I'm not necessarily worried about the gap. I'm worried about the reason for the gap. And if they show me I don't have anything to worry about with their profile, and there's lots of ways to do that, then it's not really a concern to me.
Exactly. It's okay to have a gap to say, look, I was a care provider.
Yeah.
I took care of my family. Yeah. What is wrong, and this is what I believe it or not, I've seen this.
Okay.
At the top it says stay-at-home dad on the header, and I'm like,
yeah. No, you don't like lead with it. You know what I mean? But and not that something you have to hide, but it's just not the first thing you say to someone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are something. Whatever you did before you took that time off to be with your family, that's who you are.
Professionally.
Professionally. That's what you start with. And then, we all have these situations where people say, I had to stay home to take care of a parent. I had to stay home to take care of my children. Things happen.
There was just some reason that there's a gap. And I think all we need to know is that you're a productive, that you're an interesting person, that you're a self-starter, that you have good qualities, and you can show that with your LinkedIn profile.
You can. You're telling your story. And just remember, people will hire you for what you were or are professionally. That's the story you tell. And this whole idea of being a caregiver, staying at home, take care of the family, that's all nice and it's part of the story.
Yeah.
But, unless you want to go out there and work for a assisted living facility, nobody is really going to be too interested in that. It's part of, they want to verify the fact that you got a 6-month gap here. We'll figure out how we can verify that you had 6 months between your two jobs because you were a care provider. That gets HR people will take care of that.
Right.
But you want to make sure that, whatever you were beforehand, whether it was a CPA, a geologist, a nurse, whatever, that story is what you talk about.
Right. And it doesn't, when you share stuff on LinkedIn, it doesn't even have to be things that you've necessarily generated. I'll say that too. Right. I think people feel a lot of like, oh, well, I'm not blogging or I'm not podcasting or whatever, but sometimes it's a matter of finding like a useful article, or something like that and posting that. I don't want people to feel like they have to originate everything.
Right. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb that I tell my clients, 20% of your content should be original. The other 80% is other people's content. And what you want to do is say something useful about the content. Don't just say, great article, read it, FYI. What did you take away from that article? What's the value add? Continue the discussion. Start a discussion. The other thing is when you're sharing content, please don't share the page one story of the Wall Street Journal every day. We all get the Wall Street Journal. We all see it. Go back into the second or third section. Find something that's of interest to your community. Talk about it. Get it out there. You'll be more appreciated.
Yeah, and or general trade publications, or some sources that are a little bit more.
Yes.
A little bit less on the note. Everyone sees the article about what that guy who Dr. Biden, everyone's seen that article and everyone knows that guy just sucks, right? But you don't need whatever you adding to that conversation doesn't. But you finding an article about how that how titles are reflected in marketing or something like that. Just take a more nuanced approach to it if you're going to add to the conversation.
Right.
You're not Oprah, and that's why I tell people too. They're like, "Oh, you should talk about this." I'm like, "I'm not Oprah. No one cares what I think about something." No one cares what I think about something.
Well,
But
it's
if I
different
can
with
add to the
marketing.
discussion with like a more nuanced approach or some additional information, right? Like that's then suddenly like, oh, maybe Nicole's a little bit interesting. But
And also, what I tell people: stay away from politics, religion, and sports. They tend to be controversial,
I
especially
like how sports is controversial. I mean,
well,
it makes sense. It makes sense. I'm just
well,
saying
yeah,
that. I think
especially where I live. Like you do not want to be a Boston Red Sox fan in the New York City area.
yeah, that's
That's rough.
tough. It
Or
is rough.
likewise, you want to be a Yankees fan up in the Boston area.
Yeah. So, Con, is there anything else that you want to like talk about or like that we didn't touch on today that you wish everybody who's watching might know about LinkedIn or approach LinkedIn and in like you would approach LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is the only professional business network out there right now that's worth anything. Every once in a while, somebody comes along and you see things get started up, and I get invitations to them. They're nice, but they don't go anywhere. A couple of years and they peter out. If you've got a career, whether you're self-employed, you work for other people, you need to be on LinkedIn. It's as important as having a good resume was a generation ago. And you want to constantly work it and be out there. Because given the kind of world we live in, look at the pandemic, look at 2008, the Great Recession. You never know what's going to happen, and you always need a plan B. And LinkedIn is a great way for you to always be ready to execute against that plan B.
Yeah. And, yes, your LinkedIn profile is like your resume, but being on LinkedIn is like hanging out in the lobby of like a giant building where you're running into people and having conversations. So, um, so both components of that I think are really good.
And it's a great way to bring proper kind of attention to yourself. Just don't wear a
Right.
clown suit.
Just don't wear a clown suit. And on that note, thank you so much, Con, for joining us today.
Well,
If you
thanks
guys
for
want
having
to
me.
talk more about, if you want Con to look at your LinkedIn profile or something else, we've got his website on the screen. You can check out his blog. You can follow him on social. Fill out the contact form, instead of a consultation. Yeah,
Well, happy to
thanks.
talk to you.
Thanks so much, Con.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nicole. Have a great day and happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. We'll be on next week. I don't know what my topic is, but I'll figure something out here. But stay safe and happy holidays, and we'll see you then.
See you soon. Take care now. Stay safe.